everybody! I'm Katrina Walser from Oliphant Cat, and I'm a knitting teacher and designer based in Sydney in Australia. And if we have met before, welcome back. But if this is your first time tuning in, thank you for joining us. However it was that you found me, I'm really glad that you're here. So today we have a big roundup of a bunch of Australian hand-dyed or indie-dyed yarn. So this has been a pretty highly requested video actually. I've had a bunch of you ask if I can do a sort of overview or feature some local dyers, and I've been wanting to for a while, but it's taken me a bit to get all of this yarn together. But I've finally collected enough over the last couple of months that I feel like I can do sort of a big overview. So let's just get to it. So today we are specifically going to be focusing on 4-ply merino wool yarn. And 4-ply is fingering weight for my friends overseas. If you are someone who works with a lot of indie dyed yarn or 4-ply merino, feel free to skip the next couple of minutes. I am going to give a quick overview of the yarn itself because a lot of these yarns, even though the colours are all different and beautiful, the bases are all quite similar. And I know that there are some newer knitters on here who may not have worked with this stuff before. So I just want to give a quick outline of what this wool is like. And if you just want to jump ahead to the actual colours and the yarn companies themselves, then there are bookmarks down in the description box below. It starts with Wren Ollie. Okay, so for my newer knitters, indie dyed yarn, when it first came on the scene, it generally started out as a 4-ply merino wool superwash, specifically merino wool. It felt like that was the main sort of yarn that the indie dyers were making. I don't know why. If any of my friends who are watching are dyers, if you feel like going down into the comments and enlightening us all into why it's 4-ply merino, that's the easiest thing to dye, I would love to know. One thing that I do know is that I used to think that superwash was a word that just meant you can chuck it in the washing machine, but it turns out that superwash is a way of processing wool. And I think that there's something about that process that makes it easier to dye for small batch dyers. Also, the yarn tends to come in some mix of merino and nylon. So the most common yarn bases that I've seen have been either 100% merino or 75% merino and 25% nylon. And the latter is what's usually called a sock yarn. And the reason is because the nylon makes it harder wearing, basically. So because when you're wearing your socks, they're always either rubbing on the floor or rubbing in your shoes, then you need something to give the wool a little bit more structure. And if there's nylon blended in with the wool, then it makes it a little less prone to wear and tear. There have been different mixes of merino and nylon that have come onto the scene in the last couple of years. So 80-20, so like 80% merino and 20% nylon is becoming more popular. And I've also seen a bit of 85-15. I have heard knitters who are more familiar with this sort of yarn say that they can tell the difference between the different bases and the different merino nylon mixes, but I have only been working with 4-ply wool for a couple of years. I used to be very much more in the chunky yarn camp, so I honestly can't really tell the difference. As long as it's merino or merino nylon, it all feels the same to me, more or less. It's like nice and it's squishy. I can sometimes tell the difference, but often it just feels the same. So all that being said, I'm mostly going to be reviewing all these yarns based on the colours, because that is the biggest point of difference that I find. The other couple of things, there's 2 other gotchas that I wanted to talk through in case you haven't worked with this sort of yarn before. So the first thing is that if you've just been buying wool from Spotlight or Lincraft, you're probably more used to it coming in balls, but indie dyed yarn tends to come in what's either called skeins or hanks. It's these like twisted up things. There are various reasons for it. You can ask a dyer at some point. It's just based on the fact that this is how it's dyed and it's easier to sell it like this than having to wind it all up into a ball. And so I'm going to unravel this one for you because I'm about to use it to knit with anyway. But if you are unfamiliar with these, the way that you actually knit from them is that you take the label off, and when you untwist it, it is a loop, essentially. And you can buy a ball winder and a swift, which are two pieces of equipment that help you wind this into a ball. But if you're just getting started out, the way that I always used to do it was I would pop this loop on the back of two chairs. So there'd be a chair here and a chair here. And then I would just wind it either around my fingers or around a toilet paper roll. And there are lots of videos on YouTube to show you how to do that if you would like to just wind them yourself. The other thing that I do want to say about this sort of yarn is that it gets really pricey. So part of why it took me a while to make this video is that I don't buy a lot of this, to be honest. I'm trying to be more conscious now of actually only buying it when there is a project that I have in mind for it, because I used to just buy random skeins of indie dyed yarn when I thought it was pretty, and I found that they would just sit in my stash for ages because I didn't know what to do with them, especially if I was only buying single skeins. And so I try now to only buy it if I have a project in mind. This style of yarn is usually sold in 100-gram hanks or skeins, which tends to be 400 meters. That's about standard. In Australia, these tend to retail for $30. Now, you can get a lot of use out of one skein. So for a summery top in a smaller size, so for most patterns I tend to knit either the 32-inch or the 36-inch size bust, which is generally either the second or third size, and it only takes me 2 skeins. But $60 for a summer top is still quite expensive. It can burn a bit of a hole in your wallet. So do keep that in mind if this is something that you want to get into. All right, with all of that being said, let's just get into the actual yarn. So the first company I want to talk about is Wren Ollie, and Mia from Wren Ollie is a dyer who's based in South Australia. So I think she might be in Adelaide, but I'm not entirely sure. And Wren Ollie was the first Aussie indie dyer that I discovered. Back in 2018, I came home for a visit because I was living in New York, and I decided to go to Skein Sisters because I think they might have been relatively new at the time, and I'd never been into the shop. So for those of you who don't know, Skein Sisters is a really lovely yarn store based here in Sydney. They just had this gigantic wall of Wren Ollie, and it was beautiful. So a lot of what I love about the Wren Ollie colours is that I feel like a lot of yarn dyers are quite good at either doing speckles or variegated yarn or tonal yarn, but Mia does a lot of both, and they just coordinate really nicely with each other. So because it's coming from one yarn dyer, you can get a tonal that matches really nicely with the speckled yarn. The Wren Ollie yarn comes in one sock base. It's an 85-15, and it's nice and squishy. And I don't have any skeins here to show you because I have used all of the Wren Ollie sock yarn that I've owned. So the first thing I made was a merino shawl by Amber O'Brien, and that was from the original 2 skeins that I bought from Skein Sisters, and it was in Cinnabar and a colour that I don't know. I just never wrote it down, but it was this really cute speckly cream colour. And then at the end of last year, I had an idea for a pattern that I wanted to write, which is going to be the Travelling Bolero, and it is this right here. It's just a really cute mosaic shrug. I'm making a second sample, but I have finished a first sample, so I'll pop a picture of it up here on the screen. One of the things that I love the best about the Wren Ollie yarn is that she just puts together colours that I never would have thought I would like, but they look really beautiful together. So Cinnabar is this browny colour, but it has pops of pink as well as some yellow, this goldy sort of yellow colour, and a little bit of dark purple, which I can't see any right here. If you told me that I would like a yarn that was brown and pink and yellow and purple, I would be very confused. But once you see it knit up, it is gorgeous. And she's just, obviously, because she's a dyer, she's great with colours. So she suggested that I use this wild mushroom colour to match it, and it's just turning out really nicely. So this pattern is going to be out on October 9th. And if you are interested in following along or seeing news and updates and discount codes and things about it, then I will pop a link to my newsletter sign up down below in the description box, and that's the easiest way of keeping track of what's going on with it. Mia's also just a lovely human. Aside from collaborating with her, which she has been amazing about, I've just heard really great things about Wren Ollie's customer service. I had someone tell me once that she ran out of a colour that she needed of Wren Ollie yarn, and she had ordered it quite a while ago, and she contacted Mia to ask if she was still making that colour, and it turned out that she didn't make it anymore, but she still just dyed up some extra yarn for her so that she could finish her project. So I just cannot recommend Wren Ollie enough. The next dyer that I have to chat about is Down Under Dyer, and if you've been here for long enough, you will have heard me talk about Mel quite a bit. So Melissa is my friend from my old company. It's really funny because we didn't know that we knit while we were both working there. We just found out later. But she started dyeing a little while ago, but pretty recently, maybe within a year or so ago. I don't know. Mel, you'll have to correct me. She has 2 merino sock bases. One is called Everyday Sock and the other one is called Soft Sock. Soft Sock is 75-25 and Everyday Sock is 80-20. In this particular case, I can tell the difference. The Soft Sock does feel softer because I have worked with both of the yarn bases. She also has quite a few other 4-ply bases, but they aren't traditional just merino nylon blends, so we will cover those another time. Melissa makes these really cool colorways. She also does speckles as well as tonal yarns. So I've made one project. The pink here is Magnolia and the whitey color is called Calico. I still have the calico because I had quite a bit left over. So here's the calico here in a ball. And it's just this lovely cream color with little blue and pink, and I think maybe there are some yellow specks in it hiding in there somewhere. And the magnolia color was just really lovely. If you look at the pink there, it's not one solid pink. It's got some variation in it, which just makes, I don't know, I like it a little better because it just makes it a little bit more interesting. And my favorite thing that Mel has made so far is this highlighter set. So I don't know if Stabilo is an international company or an Australian one, but it's really common to have Stabilo highlighters when you're in high school here. And so Mel made a colorway set of minis that you can buy that comes with the 4 different colors, and they really look like the highlighters, which is super cute. Every time I've tried to show these yarns on camera, they come out looking a little odd. I think because they're a little bit neon, so it's a bit hard to capture on camera, but I will post a picture of them here. I don't think she sells them in these tiny little balls anymore. She just sells them as mini skeins. And I think she sells them as a set now with the calico, so you can have a neutral to pair with them for your projects. Speaking of which, one of the things I really like about Melissa's yarn is that she's really good at putting gradient sets together. So she makes sets either of minis, or I think sometimes she makes sets that are full skeins, so you can make a full project that is a fade. So those are the 2 Aussie indie dyers who I've known about for a while. And the rest of what I have to show you is actually from companies that I learnt about because of the Big Wool Show. So the Big Wool Show happened 2 or 3 weeks ago at the start of September. And it's a big online Australian yarn show. They have a marketplace and a live stream and stuff. And so that's where I found most of these other companies. And I'm really glad I found them because they are beautiful. So thank you very much to Danielle and the other organisers of the show because it was a lot of fun. And my wallet does not thank you, but my stash does. So the first company that I have to talk about is Dying to Knit, which I just think is a cute play on words. And this is the only set of yarn from this batch that I purchased that I've actually worked with so far. So it came first in the mail, which is why it's what I'm working with first. So here are the two skeins that I have still wound up. This is the one that I unwound to show you how to wind the yarn, which is why it's looking a little bit sad, but this is what a full-size skein of Dying to Knit yarn looks like. And I am honestly obsessed. Like, actually obsessed. These colours, I don't know if I'm just on a pastel kick at the moment, but these colours are right up my alley. Oh my gosh. They are so pretty. Like, I was browsing through her colours and I literally gasped out loud at how beautiful some of them were. So, she does a lot of pastels, and again, she has a bunch of tonals and a bunch of speckly colours. So, I don't know. I know I said at the start that that's sort of rare, but maybe it's becoming more common these days. And so I cast on the Gracefully shawl, which is by my friend Jessica, and I will talk about this more, the actual project, in a podcast episode next week. But these are the 3 colours that I've used so far, and then the last colour for the shawl is going to be this here. So if I remember correctly, I think this is Lilac Fields. This one is called Birds of a Feather. The yellow is called Lemon Drop. And then this last purpley colour is called Spring Meadow. And they came in 50 gram skeins. So that was actually what sealed the deal for me. Most indie dyers sell either 100 gram skeins or 20 gram minis that you can use for contrast. But it's really uncommon to find 50 gram half skeins. And I knew I wanted to make the shawl, and it called for 4 50 gram skeins, and I didn't want to buy 400 gram skeins and only use half of them each. So part of what sealed the deal for me with these is that she sells them in 50 gram hanks. And I have to give a special shout out to Birds of a Feather. I don't know if my camera is going to pick this colour up properly. I will pop a picture of what the skeins looked like before I wound them and used them up on the screen. But I cannot get over this colour. It's this beautiful duck egg blue, and then it just has specks of purple in it. And I cannot get over how lovely it is. When it came in the skein, it looked fine. And then I balled it up and started knitting with it, and I don't know. I just want to make everything in it. I think I'm going to buy some full-sized hanks and make a summer top, or even just a full-size jumper with it, because I need something in my wardrobe, in my life, that's just made out of this. And so she has a couple of different sock bases, but I got Luscious sock, which is 85/15. It's nice and squishy. And the other thing that I do want to call out that I really appreciate about Dying to Knit is that she puts suggested pairings on her yarn listings. So if you look at a particular colour, there are suggestions down the bottom for which other colours go nicely with it. And so I lent on that quite heavily when I was choosing my colours for this shawl, and it's turning out lovely. Alright, and the rest of these are yarns that I haven't actually used yet. So we are just going to talk about the colours and things, and I will report back later on once I've actually wound them up as to how they are to actually knit with. So the first company that I have to chat about in this set is by Carola Down Under. So she is based in Sydney, and the really cool thing about her yarn is that she just uses natural dyes, which come up with these really beautiful colours that just aren't super common, because they're just these lovely earthy neutrals. And she has started making some speckled colourways, which are really cool, which I think, from what I understand, is difficult to do with natural dye. So that's really cool. And I got her 100% merino base. which they're just so squishy. I love them. So the cool thing about the fact that they're natural is that they don't have colorway names. You just get told what you actually used. So this color here is dyed with golden wattle, which if you aren't from Australia, wattle is a plant. It's like our it's our national plant. So this was dyed with golden wattle flowers and iron. And this one is dyed with privet berries, which I had never heard of privet berries before, so I googled it, and they are berries. I don't know what else to tell you about them. And I got these because I needed some neutrals to go with some other yarn that I'm using for projects. So this one here is going to be held double with some mohair that I also got from an indie dyer, but I just wanted to focus on the 4-ply merino yarns in this video. And that's going to be a beanie. And then this one is going to be one colour in a 2-colour shawl, which is called Sizzle Pop. And that brings us to Fortune Yarn Co. So this is what I'm going to be making my Sizzle Pop out of. To be honest, when I bought this, I thought it was going to be more of a grey, but in real life when it arrived, it has some very maybe green undertones, which I wasn't expecting. But given that this yarn is a little bit green as well, like it's like even the grey bits are sort of greeny grey, I think it's going to work out really nicely. So, Fortune Yarn Co. I am unsure where they're based out of. I think maybe she moved recently, because the label says that it's hand-dyed in South Australia, but the mail came from the Northern Territory, so I don't know if she was living in South Australia and she moved or what's going on. But she makes all of these really cool jewel-based colours. And I don't want to say jewel-toned because that has different implications, but all of her colours seem to be based on stones. That's the word I'm looking for. Precious stones. So this colour is called Watermelon Tourmaline. I am not pronouncing that right at all. I think tourmaline is just a precious stone, and it is definitely watermelon-y because it has these lovely pink and green colours in it. And I just really love how bold all of her colours are. I feel like, I know I said I was on a bit of a pastel kick, but I just popped onto her website and all of her colours are really bold and distinct, and I really, really like that. They're just really beautiful. And I was tossing up between this colourway and a different colourway, and I really, really love this one, but it's a really interesting base. So this is, I think she just called it tweed sock, but it's 84% merino and 16% cotton acrylic Donegal nep, which I don't know what that means. I googled it. I still don't really know what it means. From what I understand, neps, the word nep is these little tweedy chunks that are in the yarn. And I have used other tweed yarn before, and that has said nep, so I think that's what this is. Donegal, I don't know if the term Donegal nep is the whole word for the nep, or if Donegal is a type of wool, but from what I understand, what that just means is that these little pokey bits are made from cotton and acrylic, and maybe Donegal. I don't know. If you know what that means, please pop a note down in the comments, because I am sounding sort of ignorant right now and I'd really like to know, because I really did try and research it. But I am so interested to see what this looks like when I wind it up, because I think it's going to be gorgeous. And it is probably the next thing or the thing after in my queue. So keep an eye out on my podcast or on my Instagram, because I will have this spun up pretty soon. And then the last company that I want to talk about is Ash and Eve. So Ash and Eve Designs are based in Queensland, and she has some really interesting colours. I think the thing that interests me the most is how different all of her colours are. So Ash and Eve make different lines of yarn. So these two colours were from her Gelato Shop range. By two colours, I mean it's the same colour, it's just these two skeins. Were from her Gelato Shop range, and they're all like pastels and things. And then she just has like, there's a range that's based on Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and those colours are all very bold and vibrant. And so I'm really impressed by just how different all of her colours are. But I was looking for some yarn that was specifically going to match something navy that I want to wear with the top that I'm going to make out of this. So I thought this was perfect because it has the dark blue navy speckles in it. So she has different bases as well, but this one is just called Australian Sock, and it is 80% merino and 20% nylon. You get a little less meterage out of this than I'm used to. So normally in a hank of 4-ply, it tends to be 400 meters to 100 grams, but this is 334 meters to 100 grams. So I think that this yarn might just be a little bit thicker than some of the other 4-plies, which is totally fine. Different yarns have different thicknesses. And so I will just skein that up at some point and see what my gauge turns out with it. And it's lovely and squishy. And yeah, these colours are just really beautiful. And the thing that I wanted to talk about with Ash and Eve is that, okay, so here's my thing. A lot of these packages came with bonuses. There were teas, there were stitch markers, there were all sorts of things, but some of them didn't. And I don't expect any bonuses when I buy yarn. When I'm buying yarn, I'm buying yarn. And I'm really appreciative when people throw in extras, but I really don't want the indie dyers. Like, I know what it's like to run a small business. It's a lot. And the last thing I want is for a dyer to feel pressured into having to throw a bunch of extras into their packages, because I can imagine the margins on a dyeing business are very, very slim in the first place. So I didn't want to call out all of the random extras that came with the yarn, but I can't really go past the package that came with Ash and Eve design. This package came and it had a little lavender sachet in it, which, as someone who has had moth problems before, I am very appreciative about. If you don't know, lavender is one of the things that can keep moths away. So if you throw some lavender in with your yarn or with your knits, it can protect them a bit. It also came with this cute little button. And then she threw in some little tags that say handmade with love. And I don't know what I'm going to use these for, but maybe for some clothes for my daughter. This one has a sheep in it. How cute is that? And then there was some tea and these really cute stitch markers that came with a little strawberry progress keeper, which I thought was really cute. So that was Ash and Eve. And that's all of the yarn that I have right now. I would love to get my hands on more, but I'm trying to be good about not going completely overboard. I have got some other yarns in different bases that weren't 4-ply merino. So I know I mentioned earlier that indie dyers started out mostly dyeing 4-ply merino yarns, but people have expanded their ranges a lot since then. So there are 4-ply yak and camel. Okay, camel's not that popular. But there's yak and there's silk and there's all sorts of different bases. And then people have started going into chunky yarns. So I have some Wren Ollie that's on a 16-ply base, which is really quite thick. And then mohair has become really popular recently. If you want to see some of the other bases that I have, then make sure that you subscribe to the channel and hit the little bell notification, because I will be talking about the yarns as I knit them up. And yeah, if you want to see how any of this knits up, I will be talking a lot about it in upcoming podcast episodes. If you are here in Australia, there are so many lovely local dyers. So I know that we see a lot of videos and Instagram posts and podcasts and things from overseas, and it can be really exciting to see that yarn and want to grab it. But these are all here and they're lovely, and the shipping took a couple of days instead of several weeks. And there are so many other dyes that I wish I could feature, but I just don't have any of their yarn yet. So definitely check out the Big Wool Show site, because they have a very long list of a lot of local yarns, and I'll pop their website down below. If you have liked this, please do hit the like button and subscribe, because subscribing helps you see all of my new videos, and liking things helps other people find my channel. And other than that, I'm just going to get to knitting all of this. Happy knitting!